this is from one of the first clues available is over here on the right side, where you can see this black line running up 3rd Avenue. This represents the 3rd Avenue elevated line. Originally opened in 1878, it didn't close until 1955 in Manhattan, a bit later for the Bronx, but for our purposes we know that this map must have been pre-1955. And we can also see that there's no elevated line indicated on 2nd Avenue. 2nd Avenue had an elevated that opened up in 1880, but closed south of 57th Street in 1940 as a result of subway expansion. So we can tell that this map dates in a 15-year period between 1955 and 1940, based purely on the presence or lack thereof of these two elevated lines. You can also see that there's no 6th Avenue elevated, so that also gives us a good idea of the timing of the map. Something that's perhaps a bit more useful in the date is down here at the Battery, and I'll zoom in a bit so you can see. Here you can see the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which is now known as the U.L. Gary Tunnel, is indicated as being under construction. And you can see it's indicated by this dotted line. This tunnel was built in 1950, or rather completed in 1950. So, if it's indicated as under construction, there's a good chance this is probably sometime between 1947 and 1950. So now that we know the approximate date of the map within approximately a 5-year period, we can start to look at some of the more interesting features of it. Something that I noticed almost immediately, because it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is up here. At 42nd Street is Grand Central. Now, if you've ever been to Grand Central, you can see on the exterior building, underneath the clock, in very large letters, is engraved Grand Central Terminal. It is a terminal because the trains that come down from the north terminate there. It is not a station. And so for this map to label it as Grand Central Station is inaccurate. What they could be referring to, but I doubt it, could be this subway station. This subway station right here is Grand Central Station. It is not directly related to Grand Central Terminal other than the fact that it is close to it. It could also be referring to the post office, which is directly to the north of it, which is also called Grand Central Station. But the odds are they just made a mistake and wrote Grand Central Station. You can also see here that the Grand Central Station subway station, the correctly named station, goes at a diagonal. This station is part of what is today known as the 6 train, or actually rather the 456 train, indicated by the color green on today's maps. This station is right between where the line goes from Park Avenue to Lexington Avenue, and as a result, it goes at a 45-degree angle. If you've ever been on the train going into Grand Central Station, you will sharp, very abrupt turn on the train as you enter the station. Even more abrupt as you leave, since the train is accelerating to a higher speed. Something that very much interested me when I saw this map, because I was unaware of it, was the differences at Madison Square Park. Washington Square Park. Washington Square Park here shows Fifth Avenue going directly through it and connecting to West Broadway and Thompson Street. If you've been to Washington Square Park in the past 40 years, this would be a bit of a shock to you, since the park as we know it today is a solid landmass. But back in the 1950s, the park had a major thoroughfare going through it. Here you can see a picture of how it looked back in the 1950s, or probably more accurately the 1940s. You can see here is the Washington Arch, which we all know today, and as you can see, there are roads going all the way around it, with a few pieces of protection around it to prevent cars from hitting the already old arch. The fountain in the middle is surrounded by sidewalk, and then you see here Thompson and West Broadway connecting to the roundabout and leading up to Fifth Avenue. So this view is looking south from Fifth Avenue. Now, when they changed this, and I'm afraid I'm not sure exactly when they changed it, they filled in everything here with parkland, and it became the park that we know today. The park recently underwent another renovation, where this fountain, as you can see in this photo, is not lined up directly with the arch and Fifth Avenue, but rather is slightly offset. The recent renovation moved the arch, so this is looking from the opposite direction. It moved, not the arch, it moved the fountain a few feet to the west. This caused the fountain for the first time to be in line with the arch, creating for a more picturesque view. Now, this arch was known as the Washington Arch, and actually, for a time, lined up with another arch at around 24th or 25th Street. This arch was known as the Victory Arch, and was used to welcome home GIs in a massive parade right after World War I. The GIs marched up from Washington Square, up Fifth Avenue, to Madison Square, where the Victory Arch was. The Victory Arch was larger and very beautiful, and included all these columns leading up to it. Unfortunately, unlike the Washington Arch, it was built out of wood and was demolished soon thereafter. Over here, you can see the Holland Tunnel, which they've pluralized as tunnels, I guess referring to the two separate tubes that serve the tunnel. Officially, it is not written with an S. It is just referred to as the singular Holland Tunnel. The same is true for the Lincoln Tunnel. Here it is pluralized, referring to the two tubes, when in fact we only refer to it as a singular tunnel. It can also be inferred here that there are only two tunnels on the Lincoln Tunnel back then. The original tube was built in 1937, with a second tube being built in 1945, but so far as I can tell, that is not indicated on this map. All the way around here, you can see an express highway indicated. Many people nowadays would assume this is referring to the West Side Highway, but back then, as it is today, the West Side Highway ends way up here at around 57th Street. Today, what we colloquially refer to as the West Side Highway is actually a wide boulevard built between 1989 and around 2000. That wide boulevard is at grade, whereas the road being indicated here was an elevated West Side Highway. That West Side Highway was a problem from the start. When it was built both too narrow and with exit ramps that were too curvy. This prevented cars from easily entering and exiting the highway, and also prevented large trucks. By the 1970s, the road was in complete disrepair, and right here at 14th Street, a truck fell through the highway, causing the entire highway south of 14th to be closed down permanently. North of here, the elevated line continued, but it wouldn't last for long. They eventually demolished the entirety of the elevated line south of 57th Street. A small segment from 57th north still remains and connects to the modern-day West Side Highway. This area, where you can see railroad tracks, is now known as Riverside South, and if you were to go there today, you would not see